Sri Aurobindo first began to write a series of articles in the Arya, he set before us several objectives. One of those objectives was to recover the deep spiritual knowledge and experience which exist in some of our most ancient traditions, and to bring them forward in a form that the present mind can understand. It was his affirmation, which he stated in various ways at different times, that while it is necessary to get free of all the forms of the past, it is even more important to recover the essential realizations of the past, because if without them there is no future. So there is a double movement that humanity is undergoing at present. One which is the most obvious, which is a widespread breakdown and even destruction of all the most cherished forms of religions, of social norms, social organizations, governmental, administrative systems, etc. And most importantly, mindsets, individual and collective. It's a little high, you can reduce it. Mindsets which are being broken. This is one of the most painful to our experience, because when we look back at what we received from our traditions, from our lineages, from our ancestry, from our culture, from our parents, teachers, we find it so valuable. And yet those very things seem to be as if being battered, broken apart, shattered, in a way that is unrecoverable. If it was simply cracked and split, you could rejoin it perhaps. But it's being beaten so badly, you don't even know how to recover it. And we cling to those forms because that's the only way we know to retain what we received or to transmit what we got. And yet that, Sri Aurobindo observes, is the greatest error. If we cling to those forms when the divine chooses to break them, well, we break with them. What we need to cling to is the essence behind the form, within the form, the spirit, the truth, the living experience that the form enclosed and carried as a vehicle. And it is the recovery of this living experience which alone gives us the certainty of a greater future. And it is the transmission of this living experience that is necessary into the next generations. But the forms? Well, he says, either we will new create forms from that living experience, or we will refresh the old forms. Some of them are worth keeping, but not the way we received them, because we received them as hollow shells. We need to relive the experience, and then the form needs to be emerging, filled with that experience, and then it will have a life of its own. Or we create new forms, new vehicles of expression, appropriate to the mindset and the need of the present and the future. And yes, many forms will be lost, it doesn't matter. In some of the most significant writings of Sri Aurobindo, he went back to the most ancient traditions, because those most ancient traditions were founded on profound spiritual experiences. experiences which are relevant today and even more relevant for the future. And yet, they were articulated in forms which we cannot access today for two reasons. One is of language and the symbolism native to that period. But the second reason is because the mind of that age was different, the mind of this age is different. The mind of that age was more intuitive, and it found itself freely expressing intuitionally, whereas the present mind is rational, intellectual. It needs to understand in its terms, and the intuitive seems vague, abstract, irrational, and therefore unreliable. If someone tells you the truth as it is, okay, but how do I know he is right? Maybe he is wrong. Because the nature of this age is that everybody uses rationality to justify whatever they wish to. How can I be sure? Where is the certainty? And the rational mind does not have certainty. It must rely on some other device for its certainty. It turns to the senses. Yes, this is real because I can touch it. I get a blow. Yes, the blow was real because it hit me and I can feel the pain. Or it must turn upwards to something higher, deeper, which knows because it knows. It knows because it is what it knows. And that fills my rationality with the certainty. If I ask you, and you've all read this, that science teaches us our life is by chance. Some chemicals fell into place, a cell was born, some cells fell into place, a creature was born, that creature through chance knocks, random mutations became whatever we are. We need not have been here, there's no point to our being anyway. And you've heard this, you've studied it, you've been thoroughly brainwashed by science as thoroughly as the religions used to in the past. But after all that, if I ask you, do you believe your life has a purpose and meaning? And if you feel inside yourself, you know it has a purpose, you know there is a meaning. Maybe you can't articulate it, but you know it. And that's a certainty of knowing because a part of you is what it knows. And all the rationality placed before us cannot counter that knowing. This intuitive sense, this intuitive knowing was natural to that age. This intuitive state was the means of self-expression and transmission. The modern age needs a different articulation in a rationality, and yet it is not by logical argument that the mind will be convinced, but by the intuition that infuses the logic as it unfolds. And this is the beauty of Sri Aurobindo's writing, that he articulates in terms of precision and logic of the highest standard necessary to the intellect, but infuses it with the living force of the experience, which touches your heart straight, opens you to the power of that experience, and even leads you into the experience. The words are the vehicle. The experience flows through them. But the vehicle is so perfectly sculpted and chiseled down to the finest detail that the mind itself is overwhelmed with that beauty of the articulation and the form, and accepts defeated before the precision and beauty of the logic. And the whole being therefore is drawn into the experience. The mind is not just a judge, it is a participant, even as the deeper being and the heart flows and opens joyously to the experience. And that's why reading Sri Aurobindo not only leads us deeper and deeper into the experience, each time rereading it takes you a little deeper, but it also shapes our mind, recasts our mind, widens it, plastifies it, and opens it to a direct revelation of an intuitive consciousness and beyond. I've heard this from many. It is an experience I also have and many of you would have, that by reading Sri Aurobindo, our intellect develops. The mind and power of the mind, the insight, depth, precision, clarity, all of these grow. And it was not by chance that when a child asked the mother, how shall I develop my mind? Mother said, read Sri Aurobindo. It sounds so simplistic if we do not have the experience, but once we have had the experience, we can actually see there is nothing out there which has this kind of power to shape the mind. And after a while, most other things look hollow, boring compared to the richness of this. Although this is too much to take at a time, you can't keep on reading like a novel. You need to pause and allow it to assimilate and soak in, because the mind is being reshaped. And it needs time to settle. It needs time to stabilize in its new mode of being and enter in relation with life from its new state and learn to review the whole world and experience the world anew. And with each step of the mind's widening and deepening and opening and enlightening, we re-experience the whole world all over again from this new status and a new status and a new status. Until eventually, in this ascent, we will view the whole world and experience it, including through all the senses, but also superseding all the senses by the direct experience of the self, the way the self knows the world, and the way the self knows itself. And because we went through an ascent, gradation upon gradation, we went through the evolutionary stairway, we have the complete experience all the way down to the most material part of our being, all participating in that vision and experience of self. It is towards such a transformation that Sri Aurobindo leads us in the Integral Yoga. And I contrast this with many other systems as they have survived, and I qualified as they have survived today, who must let go and cut off from the physical senses and the mind and the intellect and break out into some transcendence to know that, and then fall back into this and lose that, and alternate between these states, and therefore reject the world as unchangeable, a domain of pain and suffering and death, or an illusion against that which alone is left real. Because they skipped the evolutionary stage, the bridging point, and they swung between these two worlds. That has its use, it has its value, but it's not the completeness of the universe as the way the self knows the world and itself. The self knows the world as its own outpouring, as its own manifestation, as its own play with itself. It knows itself immanent in every little part of the world. It knows itself embracing the whole world. It knows itself free and transcendent above, ever unchanging, timeless, spaceless one. It knows itself as the unknowable, indescribable, beyond all conception. And the totality of this knowing is the totality of the experience of self, which we must share because we are that. To know only a piece, a part of the experience, is to know a part of the self. To know the self as transcendent is darkness, because you don't know self as world. To know self only as world is another darkness, because we don't know self as free. To know it all the way the self knows itself is the goal. And it knows itself not only as sheer existence, utterly conscious of itself entirely in the tiniest detail of a tiny curl or a tiny atom, but it knows itself blissfully, outpouring in bliss in all that exists. And that is the bliss we must share. Sri Aurobindo drew out this knowledge, this experience, this vision, this means of climbing, awakening, knowing, recovering ourselves from the Veda and the most ancient Upanishads. Because these were the experiences of those rishis. These were the experiences with which they stamped the whole of the Indian civilization and the world. In much of the world, what remains today through so many spiritual, religious and occult traditions are fragments, glimpses, facets of this wide and complete experience. In India, a broader fragment remained, but still they were fragments. And perhaps larger fragments and several fragments, which we may call today the schools of philosophies. But they are not philosophy. Philosophy is a wrong word. In Sanskrit, they call themselves darshana. Shat darshana, the 6 great schools of, and darshana we translate as vision, experience. They are aperçu, the French word is perception, seeing of the reality. 6 different ways by which that reality can be seen and known became 6 great schools, darshanas. And the philosophical articulation is just the expression in words and logic of what was experienced. Philosophy in the ancient tradition was not the play of ideas for the sake of ideas, but articulation in terms of ideas, what was first experienced. And unless it was first experienced, you had no right to declare yourself a school of philosophy. And when great philosophers met in the most ancient times, or great experiencers, if we may say, met, they did not discuss by logic, I am correct because this is that and you are wrong because that is that. The question they asked each other, what is your experience? This is my experience. And it was experience meeting experience, complementing, completing, elevating both, or overwhelming one into the other. And this is what is described as the great debates of the Upanishads. They were not intellectual debates, they were experiences meeting experiences. And you can imagine now what a different age it would have been. The mindset of that age is so different. The values of that age are so different. Everything is seen in to out, up to down, experience to articulation. And contrast it with the mindset of today, where we struggle with words, we read books, we read texts, and we try to understand what the author meant, and construct in our own mind an understanding, a rational framework, often without the experience. And unfortunately, you don't find teachers who have living experiences, whether even in philosophy or any other theme. Very few are those who have something of that. But when you do have that, you can see the difference that takes place when that experienced person articulates, bang, there is a transmission, a resonance, an awakening. Yes, that's what it is. An awakening within us of what we already knew, but which was covered up, hidden. And the beauty of it is, it's obvious because you already knew it. You know it's right because deep inside you, you always knew it. It's just got uncovered. This was the means that they used then in the Vedic and Upanishadic age to teach. The teacher, the rishi, would meet the students, transmit an experience with words, but then the student was asked to dwell on those words, dwell on the experience, deepen, explore, confirm by this deeper knowing, where you know it's true because, well, you are it. You always knew it. You just uncovered what you always knew, confirmed by intuition. And so the words they use to transmit these experiences are what are formulated to us as the Upanishads. They are not intellectual formulations, they are intuitive formulations. They have the power of that intuition to transmit the experience. But as intuitive formations, they capture a vast aperçu, darshana, glimpse of reality. And as a complete Upanishad, each verse captures one aspect. Imagine as if reality was this multifaceted single diamond, indivisible. And you looked at the whole diamond through one of its facets. But through the facet, which is like a window, you see the whole. And then you go to another facet, and through it, you still see the whole. And each of these verses was a glimpse of the whole from this perspective, with this emphasis, with this as your window of experience, entry point, but you can recover the whole experience if you go into it fully. And the verses, one after another, facets completing, contain, describe, hold in a single experience of the totality of the Upanishad, the entire diamond. Not all the Upanishads were as complete, or as profound, or as comprehensive, or as powerful. The more ancient ones were more such. The later ones drew more and more into a mental formation of a mental experience or a mentalized experience, and thus did not have or do not contain the same. But one of the oldest, which Sri Aurobindo particularly gave special emphasis to precisely for this comprehensive and completeness, is the Isha Upanishad. Another which complements and further elaborates, goes more towards the specifics, is Kena Upanishad. And these two form like a complementary group. But still, Isha is the more comprehensive, complete. And it belongs to, the verses belong to the Yajur Veda, are all held there. And it's a part of the Veda itself. These are 18 verses which capture a certain totality, which capture the great problems of existence, the great extremes of contradictions, and harmonize and synthesize them in one vision. In our exploration, and it will be only a first entry, meant to whet your appetite and I hope lead you to pursue it on your own subsequently. In our exploration, we will limit ourselves to a few verses only and dwell on Sri Aurobindo's commentary. Since we do not belong to the mindset of that age, we do not have the necessary intuitive foundations yet. Sri Aurobindo helps us by as if bridging from that mindset to this rational intellectual mindset of today. He creates a bridge which allows us to as if cross over to that. He shapes our mind, opens us to our deeper intuitions as we proceed on that bridge. In his introduction to his commentary, he writes thus: the Upanishads, being vehicles of illumination and not of instruction, composed for seekers who had already a general familiarity with the ideas of the Vedic and Vedantic seers, and even some personal experience of the truths on which they were founded, dispense in their style with expressed transitions of thought and the development of implied or subordinate notions. So they say, okay, let's get rid of all the details, specifics, transitions, just the pure force of the vision. That's all. Each verse in the Isha Upanishad reposes on a number of ideas, implicit in the text, but nowhere set forth explicitly. The reasoning also that supports its conclusions is suggested by the words, not expressly conveyed to the intelligence. The reader, or rather the hearer, Shrota, was supposed to proceed from light to light, confirming his intuitions and verifying by his experience, not submitting the ideas to the judgment of the logical reason. So here's an interesting hint already. It's not the reader, but the hearer. And why? You will see in the Vedic tradition, they gave extreme importance to transmission by oral tradition. They did not permit you to write it. Of course they could. They knew how to write. They had a very complex language and script. They also wrote many other things. The things which are remembered, smriti, were written down. But the things which were experienced, the shruti, were transmitted only by speech. And you can understand why. When you live in the presence of the Rishi, and the Rishi speaks the words from his experience, the power of transmission is what we are catching. The words are only the vehicle. The moment you write it down, there is a loss of that, a reduction at least. And it's a great struggle to capture the experience from words which have been written on paper. There are many other mixtures which also come. So, how do you proceed from light to light? Confirming intuition, verifying by experience. To the modern mind, this method is invalid and inapplicable. It is necessary to present the ideas of the Upanishad in their completeness, underline the suggestions, supply the necessary transitions, and bring out the suppressed but always implicit reasoning. So that's what Sri Aurobindo has done in his commentary. He articulates those things, those links, puts it in the logical framework that the mind needs, but always behind it conveying this deeper experience. And then he elaborates on how it is through 4 successive movements of thought that the Upanishad reconciles and harmonizes fundamental opposites, and so on. In the very first verse, we find this grand vision. And Sri Aurobindo summarizes the first verse thus, verse 1, line 1. In the first, a basis is laid down by the idea of the one and stable spirit inhabiting and governing a universe of movement and of the forms of movement. Verse 1, line 2. On this conception, the rule of the divine life for man is founded. Enjoyment of all by renunciation of all through the exclusion of desire. There is then declared the justification of works and the physical life on the basis of an inalienable freedom of the soul, one with the Lord, amidst all the activity of the multiple movement. Verse 2. I won't go with the rest. So he summarizes the whole Upanishad in this way, and then gets into the elaboration. So this first chapter covers verse 1 to 3, and he leads us into the commentary. What I would like for our interactions over the next 3 days is to take a bit by bit some of these ideas, insights, dwell on them, meditate upon them, so that in so dwelling we touch some glimpses of the experience that they are meant to convey. And perhaps continuing that meditation on our own, we may go deeper until the full experience might unfold itself in us. And the approach is, as for any intuitive text, to silence the mind, open the heart, because often it is through the heart that the intuition is first felt, and receive. Let the impact of what is received settle in the mind and heart. And as it settles, it evokes perceptions, glimpses, ideas, forms. And still we wait. Allow it to unfold itself. Let the experience develop all that it carries. And you will find often it reveals itself in layers and layers and layers and layers. What you get the first time is not all, so wait. And perhaps the same thing returning, you will find, oh, there's so much more I missed the first time. That's the way we must study this. So even when you read it on your own later, I would suggest you follow this approach. Read a little, dwell on it, meditate on it. If it helps you, you can allow your mind to wander around the idea and explore all that it means. Or if an experience is provoked, allow it to lead you and even your thoughts. It's not that we must shun thought. Rather, thinking is the means by which the mind articulates to itself, but not knows. The knowing is to be held on a layer behind the thinking. But these are things which we will develop as we go along. The first verse of the Isha Upanishad as if captures the entire Upanishad in a sense. And then of that, the first line of the first verse as if captures the essence of that. And out of that, the first half of the first line captures even more the essential of that. And of that, the first word captures it all. This is the beauty of revealed, inspired texts. You know, in the Bhagavad Gita, there is a similar thing. It's an interesting insight. The first word of the Gita and the last word of the Gita, if you place them next to each other, you have the essence of the Gita. The first word is dharma, dharma kshetre kurukshetre, and the last line ends with mama. Dharma mama, my dharma. That's the whole theme of the Gita, isn't it? In a way. So here the verse goes, first I'll read it in Sanskrit and then Sri Aurobindo's English translation. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitha ma gridha kasya srit dhanam. Even if you don't understand Sanskrit with the mind, you will feel the resonance of the mantric power. Sri Aurobindo's translation. All this is for habitation by the Lord. Whatsoever is individual universe of movement in the universal motion. By that renounced, thou shouldst enjoy. Lust not after any man's passion. You will see there are 4 phrases. Each verse of the Upanishad has the 4 half lines. And each of these 4 half lines conveys an idea. And of course the totality holds the full experience. So the first half line is, all this is for habitation by the Lord. Isha vasyamidam sarvam. And you will see this is the theme of the whole Upanishad. And it is such a powerful theme for meditation. It is so inclusive, so complete. You can dwell on this and everything is included in that. And the first word of this half line is Isha. Isn't that the most inclusive word ever? The Lord Himself. The Lord. And everything is included in that. And especially because the concept of the Lord here is very important, and we will dwell on this a little. There are several words we use to describe that. In the Upanishads, according to the emphasis that they want to bring out, they use a different term. Tat, that. To describe it as unknowable, beyond the mind's knowing, transcending above all things. Or they say, He, Sa. When they mean by that, Him in relation to the whole cosmos. not in his transcendence and separation and mute equality, but him looking upon the cosmos, entering in relation with it, even embracing it, and even permeating, becoming, entering it as an immanent presence. But still he may be immanent, that is, in all things here, supporting, not participating. And we have a special word for that when he participates, Isha. The root sound, Isha, in the origin of the language itself, the root sound means enjoyer, possessor, Lord. Ishvara is he who is enjoyer, possessor and Lord. Of what? Of his domain. What is his domain? All. So the moment you say Isha, all is held. The divine in his unknowable, in his transcendence, in his universality, and in his individuality, in his totality, and all is Ishvara, Lord. And specifically, not only is he immanent in all things, he is all things. Not only he is all things, he is enjoying himself, possessing all things as their Lord. And the aspect of enjoyment is prominent in this word. In other verses, the Rishi uses also the other terms, Sah, Tat and all that. But here he starts with Isha, Isha Vasyam, for his habitation, for the Lord's habitation. Idam, this, Sarvam, all. All this is for the Lord's habitation. And the idam is very specific. This, all that you are seeing and touching and whatever you are, even in your most physical, sensory, most intellectual, all that is included, is for his habitation and enjoyment. Sarvam, all. And for his inhabitation, the forms are made. He makes them out of what? Out of himself, for his enjoyment. And therefore immediately you see the whole world, the whole cosmos is for this purpose alone, for his enjoyment, for the play of his bliss. There is no other purpose. What else do you want to possess and enjoy except for the possession and enjoyment? And therefore everything here is meant to be a play of his delight, meant to express his play and his delight. But somewhere it does not. There is a gap. We suffer. He enjoys, but we suffer. And we say, that fellow, he is such a, what's the word? He takes pleasure in our suffering. He inflicts on us. He is sadistic. He inflicts on us the suffering. He is enjoying it all the time. We are not. There is this gap. And the Upanishad addresses the reason for this gap. And the means for correcting it, so that we too may enjoy with him as we are meant to. We didn't enter this to suffer, we entered this to enjoy in his enjoyment. But we suffer because we have disconnected ourselves from him. We have lost our true identity and we are living in a false identity, and the false identity suffers. The recovery of the true identity is the correction. And about that, the second line of this verse leads us. The second line going simply, by that renounced thou shouldst enjoy, lust not after any man's possession. We will study it in detail a little later. This is what he calls the rule of divine life. It is only by following this rule that you can enjoy as he enjoys. But before that, we must take the second half of the first line. All this is for the habitation of the Lord. What is this? And it elaborates. What is this which he is talking about? This, whatsoever is individual universe of movement in the universal motion. Yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Yat, that, any, Kincha, tiniest piece. Imagine the tiniest piece. That is the kincha, the tiniest, every tiniest. What is that tiniest piece? Jagat. Jagatyam Jagat. Universe in universe. Each tiniest universe within the whole universe is meant for his enjoyment. And here suddenly we are placed before a different way of looking at the world. So far we have looked upon the world as so many pieces. You are different, I am different, this chair is different, table is different, ground is different, wood is different, metal is different, atom is different, electron is different, proton is different. Everything is different. And everything is finite piece of the whole. The universe is made up of all these pieces coming together, joining and completing. That's how we've always been taught to look at the universe. This teaches you a very different vision. It says every tiny piece that you see is actually a universe in itself. And later you will see is actually the whole universe. But we'll come to that a little later. But for now, let's explore the first step. Is a universe in itself. There is this beautiful aphorism of Sri Aurobindo. Unfortunately, I don't have it by heart. It goes something like this, that there is nothing small in God's eye. And God spends as much energy in forming a tiny seashell as He spends in forming a whole galaxy. Think about that. What does it take to make a massive galaxy? And all the solar systems and millions of stars within it and all the planets within those solar systems and all the moons around those and all the life forms and all the matter and all the geological processes and strata and elements and everything that's happening, all the energy and intelligence, comprehensive intelligence, just to make this massive galaxy. And here is a tiny seashell. And if you were to enlarge the seashell, and we have seen pictures of such things, maybe not the shell but other things, you will find within it fine ridges, mountains, mountain ranges, and within that, as you enlarge more and more, you find gigantic valleys, and within that, gigantic valleys within valleys and rocks within those valleys, and within that, fine fibers, perfectly arranged molecular structures, crystalline structures, atomic structures, and within that, and within that, and within that, even subatomic flux of particles appearing, disappearing, moving, changing into each other, and there's this huge ocean of waves and ripples of energy, as complex, as complete, as comprehensive as the whole galaxy. Needs the same completeness of knowledge, energy, power to do this as to do that. There's a beautiful line in one of his poems where he says, "The hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curl." Just one hair and a curl of that hair. And if you look at it in the electron microscope, all the fibrous structures and all the different elements and molecular structures which have been woven together with such precision to make this shine of the color and the curl of the hair and the springiness. And the hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curl. And this is the way the divine relates to his cosmos. Every tiniest piece, yat kincha jagatyam jagat, universe within the universe, is his full focus, all his energy, all his intelligence, all his cunning put into that. A master, perfectionist. In the tiniest detail, nothing is out of order. Even the chaos which you see in nature is a splendorous chaos. It bursts out, plays, and dies down. You see flowers when they burst on a tree. 1 million flowers suddenly blooming, and in thousands of trees, and bursting out, colors, a riot of colors, and then they fall, decay, vanish. And if you look behind it, There's this just outburst of joy, playing through all the forest, and then resting again, preparing for the next one, thrilling for the next one, looking forward to the next. What form will it be? Different from the past, never the same. Consider out there, all the beaches of the world. How many millions? And upon each of those, the millions of sea waves, ocean waves. And all the millions of waves since the earth was created. And each wave is different. And upon each wave on the crest, a million bubbles, and each bubble is different. They look similar, but you go deeper, they're different. And yet they are the same. A wave is a wave. And yet when you watch the waves, and we've all done this, I'm sure, they come and they come and they come. And each time it's fascinating because it's different and yet the same, and yet it's different. There's something to it which just holds your attention. You can see children just hypnotized watching that. And there is nothing ever repeated in the entire cosmos, in the entire history of the cosmos. What a splendorous diversity. Because he is so complete, because he holds in his potential so much, infinitely infinite. He never repeats himself. It is an outbreak of that bliss which is infinitely blissfully complex and complete. And that's how this universe was born. And for that expression it was created. And within that, each piece is as complete as the whole movement of the cosmic self-expression. And here, when it says Jagatyam Jagat, universe within universe, we get two hints, suggestions which tickle our mind. And if we let our mind open, it opens so much more. The word Jagat is used to describe the universe. But if you go into the root sounds in Sanskrit, Ja, Jayate, born, living by or born from, or existing by. That's the root sense of Ja. Gat, Gati, speed, movement, dynamism. And Jagat therefore suggests immediately to the mind, born in speed, sustained in movement. The very definition of the universe is that which is sustained by movement. And imagine if for a single moment the movement stopped, poof, there would be nothing. You say this is a flower? I say no, it is a whirl of energy. Yes, that's what science tells us now. But that's not what your senses tell you. But when you go deeper and deeper and deeper, you find everything is in a flux. Of course, within a minute, there will be fine changes. Within a day, you will see great changes. But the minutes change you do not see because your eyes cannot see. But the microscope can measure. And if you go deeper inside, you will see every molecule is vibrating. Yes, we are taught that in our physics. That's what heat is, vibration of molecule. Vibrating how? Randomly, never repeating. No vibration is ever the same. And within that, the molecule, it is constantly exchanging atoms with other molecules. That's how they decay over time. So even a molecular structure is not constant, it's changing. And within each atom is this whirl of the electron around the nucleus. And if the electron stopped whirling, the atom would cease to be. It would fall apart. And what is the electron itself? A wave of energy. You will recall the quotation yesterday mentioned. Electron, on which forms and worlds are built, leaped into being, a particle of God. A spark from the eternal's energy spilt. It is the infinite's blind, minute abode. On this chariot Shiva rides. That was the quotation mentioned yesterday. What is that finest particle? Nothing but a rippling wave, rhythmically repeating itself, self-sustaining by its rhythms. And all is merely one ocean of energy, whirls of movement. And it's the movement which keeps it static. It's the sustained movement which makes the flower appear the same. If the movement stopped, poof, all is gone. So we find suddenly here, and here comes a deep insight, the universe is defined by the nature of its movement. You stop the movement, there is no universe. But what is moving? Who moves or who makes the movement? And now you conceive of something which is unmoving behind. And that's what this is leading us to. Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam. All this is for the habitation of the Lord. The Lord in His non-movement flowing into His movement. For His inhabitation of forms, vehicles, defined as if appearing separate, but never really separate. It's one ocean, one consciousness. Taking forms through whirling to isolate and separate, cut out pieces of itself to our appearance. That's how He creates the appearance of individuality. But there is nothing constant except relationships which are constant. As long as all the relationships between the molecules and atoms stays the same, we say the flower is a flower. Change those relationships and the flower is now rotten. Whatever you call it, a rotten tissue. But it's the same molecules, the same atoms. They just change their interrelationships. Here's another interesting idea. It's the relationships between things which defines a form. The thing itself is constantly changing. The relationship is sustained. Who holds that relationship? And that gives you certain interesting ideas. Consider our own body. You say, I am so and so. But you know what? 7 years ago, if you had met me, you would have met a completely different creature. Every single atom has been replaced over the last 7 years. There's no atom which is the same since that time and now. And yet you say, I am the same person, or the government of India at least stamps on my passport, the same fellow. But all the atoms have been replaced. Even I will say my emotional imprint has changed, my ways of thinking has changed. So what is same? A certain pattern of energies, of consciousness, which is inhabiting this form. That has sustained. But even that has been changing. Behind that is something which is constantly sustaining. And we might say now, going back to our terminology, the soul, that is the same. But the soul has grown. It's not the same that it was. It has grown through the experiences it has absorbed. So what has remained same? Nothing which is in formation of the creation remains the same ever. Including the psychic being. It's entered this domain of space-time to grow. Behind that, supporting that, is something which is not in space-time. That has remained the same. Self. And Lord is self. But then that self is beyond space and time. So how is it tied to this person or this soul's trajectory? Isn't that strange? In fact, when we come to the only conclusion we have, it's the same self in you and me and in every one of us and in this flower. Because there is only one self if it's outside space-time. There cannot be two. There is no space, remember, so you cannot have two. So how does that one self appear within me as one trajectory, within you as another trajectory of form? Within that one self, unchanging, is the awareness of itself. And in that awareness it can concentrate on this or that or that or that, ever unchanging, always aware, always complete. And you have again this relationship of the Lord outside the cosmos and the Lord entering the cosmos to fill the forms. Isha Vasyamidam Sarvam. What sustains each form? He Himself, because He chooses to know Himself as this form. He Himself, because He chooses to know as flower. He Himself, because He chooses to know Himself as bird. But hang on, He is one. He cannot be divided. So the whole of Him is in flower. The whole of Him is in bird. The whole of Him is in tree. The whole of Him is in the petal of the flower. The whole of Him is in the molecule of the petal. Now suddenly you begin to see something interesting. He is wholly in each thing, and yet there are relationships between His own forms. The flower is part of the tree. The tree is part of the forest. The forest is part of the mountain. Mountain is part of the earth. Earth is part of the, and so on. But He as flower is part of He as tree, is part of He as forest. And can you see now what the verse is saying? Universe within universe. Yat kincha jagatyam jagat. Each tiniest bit of universe within universe. Within universe. Within universe. Within universe. And there is this as if manifold is the term we use in English. In mathematics also we use this word manifold, where you have this multi-dimensional relationship of part with the whole and many parts within the whole and parts within parts and so on. That's the universe. He, one who is the whole universe, is also one who is as part of universe in appearance, who is as part within the part, but a whole universe in itself, and as part within that, but a whole universe in itself. This idea comes very suggestively in the movie Men in Black. If you ever saw that, the first movie. At the end of the movie, they show the Earth and the camera zooms out until it shows the whole galaxy, and then clusters of galaxies and super galaxies, and then suddenly, boom, the whole thing is seen to be existing, the whole universe is existing inside a marble. And then this alien creature picks up the marble and throws it as a game, and we see hundreds of other marbles, each is a universe in itself, being played inside a larger universe by these alien creatures, which are of course more massive than our universe. And they play with this idea again in the same movie. If you've seen it, if you've not seen it, I shouldn't spoil the story, but if you've not seen it, you probably won't see it. The whole story revolves around them looking for a galaxy which has been stolen. And the galaxy is kept hidden on Orion's belt. So there's this whole play. Orion happens to be the cat. And around the cat is this little dangling ball, like those toys with children where you have little pictures inside. And that, when the hero picks up that, looks inside, he sees the whole galaxy inside it. And he says to the other person, to the alien, I think, how is it? How can you hold a whole galaxy inside a marble? He says, when will you humans ever get over the idea of size? Size is a delusion. It's just an appearance of relationships. This is a complete universe in itself. But the relationship of this universe with this universe is that it is smaller. Just a relationship. And if I place this flower very close to you, from your eye you would see the flower bigger than me. Isn't it? That's what happens with perspective. A change of relationship. Except that relationship you call optical illusion. But it's real, it's just another relationship. Isn't it? When you go closer to the moon, it appears so big. When you go farther from it, it appears small. It's just a shift of relationship. Actually, it's neither bigger nor smaller. It simply is the whole of the Lord as moon. As I simply am the whole of the Lord as moon, and so on. As me, and so on. In this play of relationships, it's the Lord enjoying His relationship with Himself in infinite diversity. There's a beautiful image which comes in the Puranic tradition, and the word used is Indra Jal, Indra's net. And this Indra's net is something magical. Maya Jal also they call it, the magical net. And the word Maya here is used in the sense of magical power, creative power. And it's actually a symbol of the way the cosmos is made. It is described like this. Indra's net, and Indra, remember, is the king of the mental world. There's deep symbolism here. Indra's net is so made, it has an infinity of jewels. And these jewels are so arranged that each jewel reflects all others. And within each reflection of other, you see the reflection of all others. Isn't that beautiful? It's what today in common terms they speak of the holographic universe. You take a piece and you see the whole inside the piece. And you take a piece out of that and you still see the whole within that. Or another term they use today, the fractal universe. The self-symmetry, each part resembles the whole. Look at these massive galaxies. They're all whirling like a whirlpool. It's no different. They're whirling like a cyclone. It's no different. The same equations of a cyclone rotating apply to the galaxy, apply to the whirlpool, apply to the wash basin which you use every day, and apply to the blood flowing inside the capillaries inside your brain. It's the same equations, just different relationships. So, yat kincha jagatyam jagat, each tiniest universal movement within the universal motion. Now the movement aspect is very important. Jagat suggests the movement. So we'll reread this line now. All this is for habitation by the Lord. Whatsoever is individual universe of movement in the universal motion. And in this we are already seeing this vast, massive movement, and he is standing back, supporting, unchanging, and he pouring out, flowing in the movement, and each piece apparently of the movement is a whole universe. Is in fact the whole universe. Now you can understand why Sri Aurobindo can say the same energy to create a shell as to create a whole civilization or a whole galaxy. I think he uses the word civilization, but the principle applies. So we'll read now Sri Aurobindo's commentary here. Cosmos. First he says, the basis of cosmic existence. God and world, spirit and formative nature are confronted and their relations fixed. What is cosmos? All world is a movement of the spirit in itself and is mutable and transient in all its formations and appearances. Its only eternity is an eternity of recurrence. The same rhythm repeats, that's the only thing which is permanent. The repetition is permanent, not the movement, not the form. Its only stability, a semblance caused by certain apparent fixities of relation and grouping. Because these molecules are in fixed apparent relations, so it appears like this flower is a separate thing which is fixed. Every separate object in the universe is, in truth, itself the whole universe, presenting a certain front or outward appearance of its movement. The microcosm is one with the macrocosm. Now we'll pause here and dwell a little bit on this. So far we saw all these complete movement, complete universes, but for you to say, this is the whole universe presenting one face, how do you get to that? Let's observe one thing. You take a single grain of sand. This is a statement coming from science. In order to explain this grain of sand completely, you have to end up explaining the whole universe. Why? Because to explain the crystalline structure, you need to get to certain laws of physics. You need to explain why molecules attract or repel, why charges attract, repel, what is electricity, what is gravitation, what is. And for this crystalline structure to hold, it must be under these influences coming from outside, which influences exist because of those objects outside, which exist because of those, which exist because of those, and you end up describing the whole universe. To explain the grain of sand. Because the sand grain is entirely dependent on the existence of the whole universe. In fact, the reverse is also true. The whole universe is entirely dependent on the existence of this grain of sand. If you were to suddenly remove this grain of sand totally, the universe would fall apart. And I'll explain this to you physically. It sounds a little exaggerated, but I'll explain to you and you'll accept it. This little grain of sand is in relation with everything else, gravitationally, electrically, and so on. As you know, these forces of attraction or gravitation or electrical span to infinity. Maybe they get very faint, but they span all over. So this little grain of sand existing here is actually affecting everything else in the whole universe, although minutely. even as it is being affected by everything else in the whole universe. Now if you remove the grain totally, all its effects on other things also need to be removed, right? And when that effect is removed on another grain of sand in another galaxy, that grain of sand suddenly loses a force which is working upon it, and there's a kind of a vacuum of pressure. It moves, everything else moves with it, the whole universe moves with it, and it's as if the whole universe is drawn in to fill this gap of a hollow, and gone. It falls apart. It vanishes into nothingness. This is the beauty of Maya. You see, Maya is this magical, creative, mysterious power of Brahman by which the whole universe is cast out of one indivisible, timeless, spaceless. And it's cast in such a way that everything is dependent on everything else. Remember the mesh of Indra, the Indrajala? Everything reflects everything else, and in its reflection, all else is still held. You remove one, the net falls apart. The whole universe appears as a whole and cannot exist if you cut off one piece. What an extraordinary creation. It is a whole, it is not a piece. Piece is an illusion. There is no piece, there is only one whole. There are appearances of pieces, yes, but there is no real piece. Each small piece is a part expression of the whole. And it's as if the whole universe leans to put forward this face. So when you say this flower, it is supported by the existence of all the air around and all the planets around and their electrical and gravitational fields and all the ripples of all the energies of all the atoms which merge with these ripples to create the sustaining face of flower, but face of the whole universe appearing as flower. And the face of the whole universe appearing as bouquet. And the face of the whole universe appearing as vase. But between these faces is a relationship of container and contained. The flower is part of the bouquet is part of the vase, and the vase is supported by the hall, and the hall is supported by the university is supported by the country, and container-contained relationship. Now, the interesting part is this. When you have a container-contained relationship, the flower depends on the container for its position and for its water, and is surrounded by air and depends on the air for its nourishment. So the moment you put a relationship of a container and a contained, the contained takes on the character of the container. So although we are a whole universe and the face of the universe completely complete in itself, because we exist in the container of earth, we take on the character of the earth and are dependent on earth and are in constant interchange with the earth in that dependency. So this is what he is saying here, and we continue to read his commentary. Every separate object in the universe is in truth itself the whole universe presenting a certain front or outward appearance of its movement. The microcosm is one with the macrocosm, not just representing, it is one with the whole. Yet, in the relation of principle of movement and result of movement, they are continent and contained. World in world. Movement in movement. The individual, therefore, partakes of the nature of the universal, refers back to it for its source of activity, is, as we say, subject to its laws and part of cosmic nature. Now suddenly this whole business of laws and dependence on laws becomes so clear. Because we are part of the earth container, we are subject to laws of the earth. So simple. Otherwise we would not have been subject to those laws. If we were expressed on Jupiter, we would be subject to laws of Jupiter, and so on. Flower emerging out of plant is subject to laws of plant. If the plant is malnourished, the flower will be malnourished. But the truth of flower will always be, and would attempt to express itself more and more completely, dependent though on the container. Laws of physics are nothing but the present configuration of our container and our dependence on them. If you could somehow recover your oneness with the whole and oneness with the Lord, you would not be dependent on those laws anymore. You would be able to be effectively free of the dependence on the container and even change the container, change the laws, change that relationship, manifest something which the container could not support by itself. When something of that possibility leaks out, we call it miracle. Miracle is nothing but the free choice of a higher consciousness manifesting in a lower container. And we have the word transformation, a divinization, a divine life, meaning the self taking charge of this substance of its expression, representing its freedom fully, not dependent on the existing laws and relationships. No big deal, isn't it? Just has to come forward and take charge and rearrange the relationships. Who made the relationship? It made them. It just has to change them. It's no big deal seen from that perspective of the self. Of course, in the process of nature and evolution, we have a whole lot of things to deal with. But the interesting thing here is the relationship of container and contained, which puts a limitation on our form and expression, and which makes the whole universe now so rational, logical, and bound in these relationships. And yet everything is a free expression of self. And here we are going to touch on a deep idea. The flower always existed. The divine expressing himself as flower is always in him. But the form of flower appearing in this space and time is dependent on the conditions around. The form expresses, and then the flower withdraws from the form, and the form collapses. The flower remains. And so it is for everything in the universe. The truth of it is always held in the Lord's innumerable multiplicity of His bliss. He then projects into the domain of movement of space-time, Jagat, the form of His self-expression, for His play, for His enjoyment, to inhabit them for a while, and then withdraws, and the form collapses. It is He who sustained the form from within. His withdrawal leads to the collapse of the form. And everything in the universe is thus. Now when you look at the universe, can you show me one place in the world which is not sacred? Every form is inhabited by Him, is sustained by Him, and returns to Him. Everything can be a gateway, so to say, to discover Him. There's nothing which is not potentially a gateway. Yes, some gateways are more difficult. Some gateways are easier. A beautiful flower, it's easier for us to connect to His beauty and joy. Whereas a worm and a snake creates in us this sense of yuckiness. There's a repulsion. But who has the repulsion? My nature, my habitual mind and instincts of energies. Not He within me. He enjoys. And even He enjoys the play of that repulsion, and the play of that like and dislike, and the battle and the conflict, even as the reunion and the love. For Him, they are all facets of His play. Could you get me a copy of Savitri, please? Bharat. When we ask this question, why does He choose? Why did He choose to play like this? Why did He choose to create this kind of universe? Here we get our answer. For Him, they are all His forms. For Him, they are all His play. And there is nothing which is not himself or an expression of his delight. Narad, let it be, doesn't matter. Let it be. So there is a beautiful passage in Savitri where this question is asked of Narad. Why the world must be such, why this suffering and so on. And he gives a beautiful and detailed response. As part of that, he describes why and how the soul chose to enter this world. Would you be able to remember the page where this description of the soul leans down? Can you tell me the page, Narad? Okay. So there is this beautiful passage where he describes how the soul looks at this possibility of experiencing its opposites. It is tired of its perfect and secure bliss and conceives of an experience where maybe that bliss is not, where that security is not. And the moment it thinks of that, whatever the divine imagines, conceives, becomes true. And this dark shadow appears and he leans into it and the whole descent begins. Thank you. So I'll read that passage and we'll end with that for today. So it's in the canto, The Way of Fate and the Problem of Pain. Well, I just find an interesting passage where he says, "Bear, thou shalt find at last thy road to bliss. Bliss is the secret stuff of all that lives. Even pain and grief are garbs of world delight. It hides behind thy sorrow and thy cry, because thy strength is a part and not God's whole. Because afflicted by thy little self, thy consciousness forgets to be divine. As it walks in the vague penumbra of the flesh and cannot bear the world's tremendous touch, thou criest out and sayest that there is pain. Because our consciousness is tiny and the universe is vast and we have cut ourselves off, we have lost the wholeness. So when the universe touches us, and it's an embrace, it's a loving, blissful touch, we can't bear it, it's too much. We finite, that infinite, and we feel that as pain. Indifference, pain, and joy, a triple disguise, attire the rapturous dancer in the ways." This is the Shiva's dance, which creates the whole cosmos. Withhold from thee the body of God's bliss. The Spirit's strength shall make thee one with God. Thy agony shall change to ecstasy. Indifference deepen into infinity's calm, and joy laugh nude on the peaks of the Absolute. This is what has to happen. This is not the line though which I wanted. So if I can find it quickly, then otherwise later on. Okay, we'll keep it for later. But the idea is then the soul leans down from this too safe eternity and wants to experience this conflict of opposites, dualities, and that's part of the adventure that we have come here to play. And this then connects with the second line of the first verse, and I'll only read the translation for now. By that renounced, thou shouldst enjoy. The world is meant to be enjoyed, but we are doing it the wrong way. We need to do it the right way. Then we can be part of His enjoyment. By that renounced, thou shouldst enjoy. Lust not after any man's possession. I read the Sanskrit verse again. We can meditate in silence on the whatever we receive in the totality of its experience. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat tena tyaktena bhunjitha ma gridha kasya svidhanam. All this is for habitation by the Lord. Whatsoever is individual universe of movement in the universal motion. By that renounced, thou shouldst enjoy. Lust not after any man's possession.